All right, Jason's Deli now providing the power behind our Big Ten wrap-up. Along with Eric Rogers, I am Rich Reynolds, and yeah, we got a lot to talk about today in the Big Ten football conference as the games over this weekend. Some of them were a little bit surprising. One that wasn't surprising is Wisconsin beating Rutgers. You kind of figured that the Badgers would do that. I kind of hoped that, though, that score was going to look a little bit better than the final of 31-17, especially when the Badgers are at Camp Randall playing that game.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I think they've only covered, one game this year against the spread, so if you're a betting kind of person, you might want to avoid Wisconsin here from here on out. But, they do get the win. Jack Cohn comes into that ball game. Alex Hornibrook ends up leaving with more of those concussion-like symptoms and a head injury. So not sure what that means for next week facing Penn State. But let's kind of get a little bit more into this game and what Jonathan Taylor did.
Yeah, and Jonathan Taylor was the bright light, I guess, if you will, for the Badgers. Again, going over 200 yards, 3 touchdowns, not 300 touchdowns.
Hey, that'd be nice.
That'd be a record or something. And, not fumbling the football, which, by the way, is kind of newsworthy, even when it shouldn't be, but Jonathan Taylor at least going off and helping that quarterback situation right now, which for the Badgers looks a little dicey.
Yeah, well, when the Badgers are kind of putting together the game plan for the week, they write down what their goals are on their board, and one of those goals was Jonathan Taylor and ball security. So everyone knew what the game plan was, and everyone knew we were focusing on that for this game. And as Badger fans, you got to feel pretty good about that. And now you're facing a couple more difficult teams here going forward that you would think that maybe there's still some sort of chance in the Big Ten West here with some teams losing this week.
Yeah, so, Bucky also bowl eligible. I know that doesn't mean much around here anymore. Before 1992, that was like a huge deal, by the way, to be bowl eligible.
But we're looking at probably like Pinstripe Bowl or
hey, man, a bowl's a bowl. You can't take them for granted.
I guess not. I mean,
Right.
You've seen some good plays, so we'll see what happens here moving forward with the Badgers.
Hey, one team that can't take bowls for granted anymore is the Nebraska Cornhuskers, who are not going to be bowl eligible this year. That because they lost their 7th game. That happened against Ohio State. Speaking of surprising scores and not surprising outcomes, how about this one? Nebraska hanging around with the Buckeyes at the Horseshoe in Columbus.
Yeah, there's a couple different ways to look at this one, Rich, and that's Ohio State. Obviously, you lose to Purdue, and then you go and struggle against Nebraska and think about what their implications are for what their season is in the East. And but then the other side of that is Nebraska. You've lost, 4 of their 7 losses have come by 5 points or less. That hurts. I mean, that's for as much as you want to talk about moral victories and how well they've played, they do have a pretty talented team. They just haven't put it all together.
Yeah, and I think Scott Frost, that's one of his saving graces. He could say how close that they actually are. And like you said, the talent on that team is pretty darn good. They play fast and they play pretty tough. So not a conference game. Notre Dame beating Northwestern at Northwestern. I think the surprising thing out of that one, as many Notre Dame fans as there are in Chicago, and as many Northwestern fans as there are in Chicago, that stadium was having troubles getting full, and it's a stadium that seats like 48,000. I mean, what the heck is going on there?
It's a game against a top 5 team,
Yeah.
and you have what Notre Dame has done this year at 9-0 now, and obviously staying alive in the college football playoff race. And Ian Book, 343 yards, 2 touchdowns, a rushing score as well for the quarterback for the Irish. And Northwestern, they did hang around, and that's kind of been the MO. And teams that face Northwestern, and people are probably going to look across the nation and say, it's only a 10-point win, but anything against Northwestern in that environment, you got to feel good about.
Yeah, so Notre Dame continues to remain undefeated on this side of the bracket. Some crossover games. One that really affects the Wisconsin Badgers was Iowa going to Purdue and losing. So Bucky needed to stay, and they were basically needing to tie Iowa because they win the head-to-head battle right there. So Iowa loses on a late field goal to Purdue.
That'll help Wisconsin. Yeah, you're looking at what is happening there. Purdue quarterback David Blau, 4 touchdowns, 300-plus yards for the 5th time this season. I mean, this guy is a stud. You get that late field goal and win that ball game, and you feel good about that, and you can going to face Minnesota next week. Iowa, a tough game. I'm interested as a Badger fan to look at what Iowa and Northwestern will be like for next week, because again, that's a game where if Iowa wins, you're knocking Northwestern down a peg, and for the Badgers, hopefully some chances.
Yeah, Bucky needs Iowa to win that football game, because at this point you need Northwestern to lose twice, and then the games after that for Northwestern, if you're looking ahead on their schedule, aren't that tough. They got Illinois and they have Minnesota, who by the way faced each other.
Yes.
And you want to talk about a surprising score. Illinois putting up a double nickel against Minnesota is really shocking.
Shocking, yes, that's the word for it. I'm looking through the the scores for the week, and I didn't get to catch much of that game, but boy, that offense has moments where they are coming through, and we talk about Lovie Smith every week. It seems like, and he's the expectations for him and that team, and it seems like he's starting to show up.
Another one where the outcome wasn't shocking, but maybe the score again was shocking. Kind of a theme, if you notice, that we got going here. Michigan blowing the doors off of Penn State. Michigan's legit right now.
Well, on the flip side, Penn State had a down year, if you want to call it that. 6-3, not where you thought they might be, and now that game, if Bucky were still in it at this point in the playoff race, a game against Penn State doesn't mean as much.
Yeah, well, they're still in it for the Big Ten race somehow, some way. The Badgers are alive, and a couple things can go right for them next week, including a win at Penn State. They are right in it. For Eric, I'm Rich. That's our report.